Welcome back to Butler on Business. Jason, would you please introduce our distinguished guest?
We are joined now on the phone by Dr. Thomas E. Woods, Jr. Dr. Woods is a senior fellow of the Ludwig von Mises Institute. He holds a bachelor's degree in history from Harvard and a PhD from Columbia University. He is the author of 11 books, including the New York Times bestseller Meltdown, and just released his most recent book, Rollback, Repealing Big Government Before the Coming Financial Collapse. Dr. Woods, thank you for joining us on Butler on Business today.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you.
The issues of government spending and the debt ceiling have been major topics in the news, but Rollback, your newest book, is about much more than just shrinking the size of the budget. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about the major themes you address in this book?
Yeah, sure. The subtitle actually involves the coming fiscal collapse, because my argument isn't so much that we've got another financial collapse coming, although we may, but that we have an inevitable fiscal collapse coming. It's absolutely unavoidable because of the aging of the population, the pressures on the entitlement programs, the coming just massive increase in expenditures on interest payments on the national debt. I mean, all of it is adding up to a complete train wreck. But you're right. Primarily, the book is not about cutting the budget, although, of course, if people took my advice, we would indeed be cutting the budget quite a bit. The main argument basically is this. Look, given that we're obviously going to have to make wrenching changes, given that the entitlement programs are in the hole to the tune of over $100 trillion, and that's just one of our problems, it's unavoidable that major changes are coming. So the key argument of the book is we can't afford any longer to believe things about government that we were taught in the sixth grade. We were all taught to believe that government, and this will sound familiar to everybody listening, right? Government is populated by wonderful, selfless public servants who are innocently pursuing the common good, and without them, we'd all be lost. We'd all be wandering around. We'd have no art or science. We'd all be ignoramuses. We'd all have our limbs blown off by exploding consumer products, or we'd all be working in a mine for $1 a day. This is the version of things that we got in the government-run schools, about what a bunch of pathetic boobs we'd be if it weren't for the careful and paternal custodianship of Joe Biden. Wherever would we be? We can't afford to believe this anymore. First of all, it's not true. All these things that I've just said, I know they're superficially plausible. I understand why people believe them. But basically what I'm doing is dismantling all the major claims that government makes for itself, because these claims have been quite expensive. They have led Americans to acquiesce in the ongoing growth of government, to look the other way as its spending has grown, because their view is, this is what they were taught in school, that, once in a while some of these people may be corrupt, but they really have my interests at heart. And, who could possibly be opposed to giving them more resources and power? Well, this whole mentality is what got us in this position in the first place. Now we're in a totally impossible situation in which people have been led to be totally dependent on this institution, and it's going to have to begin reneging on some of its promises. Well, to me, it's more important than just cutting the budget, is cutting out all the propaganda that led people to go along with the growth of government in the first place. Well, here's some more specifics about the situation. Even if we assume the best case scenario, so let's say we do have a really robust recovery, and let's say interest rates stay extremely low so that the U.S. government can continue to borrow very cheaply. Even in the best case scenario then, even with these things holding true, government's own numbers tell us that interest payments alone on the national debt will be just about $1 trillion a year. And that's in the best case scenario. And I don't think the best case scenario is, in this case, likely to obtain. So I think this will be even worse. So that's a pretty big problem in and of itself. Then there's the fact that at any moment, really, at any moment, it could be anything. It could be a negative headline coming out of the U.S. It could be something that causes investors to lose confidence in the U.S. government. Whatever it is, whatever series of bad reports about the U.S. economy, whatever, we're really just one or two bad headlines away from a crisis, because at any moment, anything like that could cause investors to demand a higher interest return on lending to the U.S. And then the crisis really comes, because then how's it going to finance this? How's it going to pay for the borrowing? and how's it also going to pay out all the obligations that it's racked up? That becomes the issue. And then in terms of the entitlement programs, well, this is a big, big problem because our population is aging, and really no provision has been made for this. I mean, we're going to be living in a world very soon in which the number of people aged 100 and higher is going to increase by about 13 times. And I say this not because I regret that people are living longer, but I regret that no one's prepared for it. No one's talking about it. And this is going on not just in the U.S., but all over the developed world. It's even worse in Western Europe and in China and in Japan. It's even worse there. And there, finance ministers will admit to you behind closed doors that, yeah, their welfare state programs are about to be completely swept away. There's just no way they can sustain them in light of the demographics. But they won't say that publicly because they figure by the time the crisis hits, they'll be safely retired. So this is something that's going on everywhere, as I say, at least in the developed world. You've got a very small working population, a very large elderly and or retired population. So that's, by and large, the situation. And every year that this is not addressed, every year that we just stand pat, the entitlement problem gets worse by somewhere between $2 and $4 trillion. So for the president to say, we can't make major cuts or changes now, that would be terrible and irresponsible. Well, I'll tell you what would be irresponsible is not to make the changes. It's to wait 10 years so that the problem is then $40 trillion worse, and then suddenly make these changes on a completely unsuspecting population. I'd say that would be irresponsible.
Dr. Woods, I want to personally thank you for all the work that you've done and continue to do. I think your books offer some of the best, most concise explanations of essential concepts. I've given several copies of Meltdown and Nullification to family and friends who are interested in the issues. And I'd like for you to tell our listeners, where is the best place to find your newest book, Rollback: Repealing Big Government Before the Coming Fiscal Collapse?
Well, it's in all the stores, and it's on Amazon. But if you want to read a free chapter, you can get it, as I mentioned, at rollbackbook.com. And if you do nothing else, I strongly urge you to do that. And secondly, you can get a lot of totally free stuff at my own personal website, tomwoods.com.
Well, Dr. Woods, thank you so much for joining us on the show today, and we certainly wish you continued success.
Thank you, gentlemen. The pleasure was mine.